The Whispered Judgments. The late afternoon sun bathed the countryside chapel in a warm glow, its stained glass windows casting multicolored patterns across the wooden pews. The scent of wildflowers filled the air, their delicate arrangements draping elegantly along each row, an unintentional metaphor for the blending of two vastly different worlds. Ben Calloway stood at the altar, fidgeting with his bow tie. His normally unshakable confidence had been replaced by nervous excitement, a deep awareness that today was about more than just vows. It was about proving the world wrong. The wooden doors creaked open, and 5 little girls in matching white dresses entered in formation. Each had their own unique embellishment that reflected her distinct personality. Ava's dress bore tiny paintbrush patterns, Sophia's was adorned with embroidered gears. Layla's shimmered with sequins, Nana's featured delicate floral embroidery, and Maya's had a tiny sash that resembled a business suit. The quintuplets moved with a sense of purpose, though their execution varied. Maya led with a determined stride, ensuring her sisters followed correctly. Layla giggled as she tossed rose petals at her sisters instead of on the aisle. Sophia, ever the scientist, carefully studied how the petals fluttered to the ground. Nina meticulously placed each petal as if planting seeds, while Ava quietly moved through, designing intricate patterns with the petals before her. And then came Alicia. Ben's breath caught in his throat as his bride appeared in the doorway. She wore a simple white gown that glowed in the afternoon sunlight, her rich brown skin radiating warmth. Her dark curls were woven with wildflowers, and her deep, knowing eyes met his across the aisle. She was his everything. As Alicia approached, Ben felt the weight of 100 whispered judgments. He could feel his mother's disapproving gaze from the front pew, her fingers gripping the armrest as if it were the last tether holding her from stopping the ceremony. His father, a man of stern expressions and unyielding expectations, shook his head slightly, his disappointment palpable. Further back, Ben's business partners from his thriving tech firm sat stiffly in their seats. Their murmurs were quiet, but he knew their thoughts. How could Ben Calloway, a rising star in the industry, throw away his future like this? A wife with 5 children. 5 children that weren't even his. The scandal. The chaos. But Ben only saw Alicia. He only saw the woman who had captured his heart with her kindness, her unwavering strength, and the fire in her spirit that had been tempered through trials few could comprehend. The ceremony proceeded, and despite the weight of doubt in the room, Ben's voice was steady when he said, "I do." The celebration and the shadows of doubt. After the ceremony, the reception unfolded beneath twinkling lights strung between old oak trees. Rustic wooden tables were adorned with lace runners and mason jar candles, the scene straight from a countryside dream. Laughter and music intertwined, filling the evening air with warmth. Ben watched as his new daughters flitted between guests, each leaving her own mark on the gathering. Maya, ever the organizer, had made a structured plan for how they would greet guests. Layla performed exaggerated comedy bits for anyone who would watch, her impersonations of guests earning belly laughs. Sophia excitedly described a science experiment she had recently conducted, her young mind already brimming with possibilities. Nina had found a quiet corner where she sat with an elderly guest, discussing the importance of soil nutrition, while Ava sketched portraits of people in the candlelight. Despite the lively atmosphere, Ben could feel the tension. His mother approached, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the joy. "Benjamin, are you sure about this?" she asked, her manicured fingers tightening around her wine glass. Before he could answer, his father stepped beside her. "This isn't the life we envisioned for you, son. You're running a multi-million-dollar company. A family like this." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's a distraction." Ben exhaled slowly. He had anticipated this. He had known the resistance would come. But what his parents didn't understand, what no one in that room truly grasped, was that this family wasn't a burden. They were his greatest inspiration. Across the lawn, his business associates watched the girls with thinly veiled skepticism. Ben overheard snippets of their conversation. It's a lot of responsibility for a guy like Ben. 5 kids. I don't see how he thinks he can manage a company and a built-in family like that. This is career suicide. Ben clenched his fists but forced himself to remain composed. He had spent his life chasing their approval, but for the first time, he realized he didn't need it. A new home, a new life. Later that evening, Ben stepped over the threshold of Alicia's home. Their home now, a cozy 2-story house filled with warmth and laughter. Unlike his cold, modern penthouse, this house had life. The walls were covered with sketches, homemade science charts, and hand-painted signs. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable, the scent of fresh lavender filling the air. "Welcome to the Johnson household, Mr. Ben," Maya announced formally, holding a clipboard. "We've prepared a comprehensive tour." Ben chuckled as the girls led him through their world. Ava showed him her drawing corner, shyly presenting a sketch where she had added him into the family portrait. Sophia introduced him to her makeshift lab, where glass jars held growing crystals. "I'm studying molecular structures through crystallization," she explained, her small fingers adjusting a microscope. Layla bounced around, telling jokes and poking fun at how unprepared he looked for fatherhood. Nina introduced him to her collection of plants, each with its own name. "Plants are like people," she whispered. "They grow best when they're cared for." Maya showed him the family schedule, color-coded and meticulously planned. "I've allotted time for you to learn our system," she informed him seriously. Ben stood in the middle of the chaos, watching these 5 wildly different yet beautiful souls, and realized something profound. This was the first time in his life he felt like he belonged. The first morning as a father. The next morning, Ben awoke to the loudest clanging he had ever heard. He stumbled down the stairs in a daze, only to find Layla enthusiastically banging a wooden spoon against a pot. "Rise and shine, everybody. Morning concert time." Sophia was at the counter, her safety goggles on as she mixed a suspicious-looking smoothie. "I'm calculating the perfect balance of vitamins and proteins." Nina was rearranging her plants by the windowsill, whispering about how the morning light was best for the succulents. Maya was directing the morning routine like a drill sergeant. And Ava, she was frantically searching for her sketchbook, her voice a near whisper. "I was working on something important." Ben rubbed his temple, chuckling despite himself. How about pancakes? The chaos of breakfast quickly became a comedy of errors. Flour exploded across the counter. Eggshells fell into the batter. The electric mixer splattered pancake mix onto his face. Layla was the first to burst into laughter, and soon the entire room was filled with giggles. And in that moment, as he stood there, covered in flour and surrounded by his new family, Ben Calloway knew. He had made the best decision of his life. The price of love. The sun had barely begun its ascent when Ben Calloway slipped out of bed. Careful not to wake Alicia, he stood in the dim light of their bedroom, staring out of the window at the quiet suburban street. The scent of lavender, Alicia's favorite, lingered in the air. It had been 6 weeks since the wedding. 6 weeks since he had traded in high-rise boardrooms and penthouse apartments for school drop-offs, science experiments, and a family of 7. And the world had not let him forget it. The whispers followed him everywhere, at business meetings, in coffee shops, even during casual conversations with so-called friends. Some had been bold enough to voice their doubts to his face. "You had everything, Ben. Wealth, power, freedom. Why would you throw it away? You're a CEO, not a daycare provider. A black woman with 5 kids. Do you have any idea what you just signed up for?" Even his own parents had been relentless in their disappointment. His mother's phone calls were predictable, filled with carefully curated concern. "Benjamin, dear, you must understand how this looks. We're only thinking about your future. If things get too difficult, you know you can always come home." It was never about his happiness. It was about appearances. Ben exhaled deeply, raking a hand through his hair before stepping out of the room. As soon as he entered the hallway, He nearly tripped over Layla, who was sprawled across the floor in a dramatic pose. "I'm dying," she moaned. "Good morning to you too," Ben said, stepping over her. "No, Dad. I'm dying inside. I have to present in class today, and I just know nobody is going to laugh at my jokes." Ben smirked. "Tell me one." Layla sprang to her feet, cleared her throat, and put on her most theatrical expression. "Why did the smartphone break up with the laptop?" "Why?" "Because it couldn't handle the connection." Ben chuckled. "That's solid, kid. You'll do fine. You have to say that. You signed up for the full dad package." He gave her a playful nudge before heading downstairs, where the morning chaos had already begun. The world's judgment. By the time he reached the office later that morning, Ben was already dreading what awaited him. His company, Callaway Technologies, was at the peak of its success. It was a multi-million-dollar empire specializing in innovative software and artificial intelligence, a far cry from the garage startup it had once been. Investors clamored to be part of his next big project, and his employees revered him. Or at least they had. As soon as he entered the sleek, glass-walled boardroom, the tension was palpable. His CFO, Sarah Martinez, gave him a tight smile before launching into the latest financial reports. His business partner, Mark Chen, cleared his throat, hesitating before speaking. "Ben, we need to talk about the image you're projecting." Ben folded his arms. "Which image is that?" Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah before continuing. "Look, the numbers are still solid, but investors are starting to worry. Your marriage, it's all over the media. People are questioning your priorities." "My priorities? They think you're distracted," Sarah interjected, her tone softer but no less firm. "They're concerned about how much focus you can put into the company while managing, well, your new responsibilities." Ben's jaw tightened. "Let me get this straight. I marry a woman I love, and now my ability to lead a tech empire is in question." "It's not just about you, Ben," Mark said. "The board has a duty to protect our interests. Your public image affects the company's valuation. You have to consider how this looks to the world." Ben felt the anger rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Let me make something clear," he said, his voice measured but firm. "I built this company from the ground up. I put in the hours, the sacrifices, the sweat and sleepless nights. If my marriage is an issue for investors, then they're free to take their money elsewhere. But I will not." He slammed his hand on the table. "I will not apologize for loving my wife and my daughters." Silence. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, while Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "We're just asking you to be careful," Sarah said. "People are watching, Ben, and not all of them want to see you succeed." Ben leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Then let them watch." Alicia's struggle. While Ben fought battles in boardrooms, Alicia faced her own war. She had built a reputation in the community as a strong advocate for underprivileged families, spearheading education programs, and working with local businesses to provide resources for struggling students. But ever since her marriage, doors had started closing. At the local community center, where she had spent years organizing after-school programs, she was suddenly met with polite but firm resistance. "Alicia, we're reassessing our funding priorities. We've decided to go in a different direction." There have been concerns from donors. She knew what they meant. Concerns. They no longer saw her as just Alicia Johnson, the community leader. Now she was Ben Callaway's wife, and that came with assumptions. She overheard whispers at the grocery store. "She really hit the jackpot, huh? 5 kids. I wonder how long before he regrets it." She ignored them, kept her head high, but some nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had made Ben's life harder. Until one evening, when she found him sitting on the porch, his face buried in his hands. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Rough day." Ben let out a humorless chuckle. "They think I'm ruining my career." Alicia reached for his hand. "Do you regret it?" He turned to face her, his blue eyes locking onto her deep brown ones. Never. She exhaled, relief washing over her. Then let them think what they want, she whispered. They sat in silence, the hum of the crickets filling the space between them, knowing that the fight was far from over. The breaking point. It was an unseasonably cold evening when the breaking point came. Ben arrived home to find Alicia in the kitchen, gripping a letter with trembling hands. "What is it?" She handed it to him. A formal notice from the school board. An anonymous complaint had been filed, questioning whether Alicia and Ben's situation was suitable for the girls. A social worker had been assigned to evaluate the household environment. Ben felt his blood turn to ice. "They're questioning our ability to raise our own daughters." Alicia swallowed hard. "Somebody wants to see us fail, Ben." Anger roared inside him. He had tolerated the whispers, the business deals falling through, the judgmental stares. But this was war. He pulled Alicia into his arms. "They want to break us," he murmured into her hair. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." Alicia pulled back, her expression fierce. "Then let's show them." Proving them wrong. The morning after the social services notice arrived, the Calloway-Johnson household was anything but quiet. Maya had taken control, drafting a schedule for potential home inspections. "We need to be ready," she said, pacing the living room. "If they want to question our household environment, then we're going to make sure there's nothing for them to find." Ava, usually the quietest of the five, had already begun sketching out a vision for how the house should look. "If they want perfection, we'll give them perfection," she murmured, turning her ideas into detailed illustrations. Sophia, fueled by righteous anger, was researching child welfare laws and precedent cases. "This is an attack," she fumed. "It's systemic. They wouldn't be doing this if it was just Dad, a rich white guy with 5 adopted daughters. But because Mom is a black woman and we were born into this family instead of chosen, suddenly there's a problem." Layla, ever the entertainer, had turned to humor to process her emotions. "I mean, I always knew we were a lot to handle, but I didn't think we'd be under government investigation for it." And Nina, the gentle heart of the family, was gathering letters of support from teachers, neighbors, and family friends. "People know who we are," she said with quiet confidence. "They won't let this happen." Despite their brave faces, Ben and Alicia could see the fear beneath their daughter's determination. Their home, this family, had become the target of something bigger than just a complaint. Someone wanted to see them fail, and they weren't about to let that happen. The social worker's arrival. The knock came promptly at 10:00 a.m. Ben opened the door to find a woman in a crisp navy suit, a leather-bound notebook in her hands. Her name tag read Eleanor Greer, Child Welfare Investigator. Her expression was unreadable, her posture professional but detached. She stepped inside and immediately began surveying the space. Alicia greeted her with a warm smile. "Would you like some coffee or tea?" "No, thank you. Let's begin." She moved through the house with methodical precision, taking notes. The kitchen was spotless, though traces of the morning's pancake breakfast still lingered in the air. The living room was organized but lively, filled with books, artwork, and the kind of minor clutter that comes with raising 5 children. Each girl led her on a personal tour of her space, their personalities shining through despite the tension. Maya's room was immaculately structured, with a whiteboard covered in schedules and sticky notes. Sophia proudly displayed her latest invention, a small solar-powered device that helped circulate fresh air in enclosed spaces. Ava's walls were covered in her own artwork, soft strokes of color blending into meaningful imagery. Layla performed a short comedy skit right there in the hallway, trying to win over the social worker with humor. And Nina introduced her to an entire ecosystem of plants in her bedroom, explaining the specific care needed for each species. Ms. Greer took notes but remained mostly unreadable. Then she sat down with Ben and Alicia. "We've received concerns about the emotional stability of the children, given the drastic change in their family situation." Ben's jaw tightened, but Alicia beat him to a response. You mean the fact that they finally have two parents who love and support them. Ms. Greer didn't react. Change, even positive change, can be disruptive to a child's development. Ben inhaled deeply, trying to rein in his frustration. I understand the concern, but if you take one look at our daughters, you'll see they're thriving. Ms. Greer studied them both for a long moment before closing her notebook. I'll compile my report and be in touch. Then she left. A battle in the boardroom. As if dealing with a social worker wasn't enough, Ben had a meeting scheduled with his investors that same afternoon, and he knew exactly what was coming. He entered the glass-walled boardroom at Callaway Technologies to find his executives waiting, their faces tense. Mark Chen, his business partner, wasted no time. Ben, we need to talk about optics. Ben leaned back in his chair, already exhausted. By all means, let's talk. There's been talk in the media about your family situation. Investors are worried about instability. Instability. Ben scoffed. Do I look unstable? It's not just about you. Sarah Martinez, the CFO, said carefully. Your name is attached to this company. Every decision you make reflects on us. And right now, investors are wondering if you can manage a multi-million-dollar business and a household of 5 children. I don't see anyone questioning male CEOs who go home to 5 kids, Ben countered. Because those kids usually come with a nanny. Silence. Ben exhaled sharply. So what are you asking? That I step down. Mark hesitated. We're asking you to consider restructuring your role. Maybe take on a more advisory position while we find a new CEO to handle the company's daily operations. Ben felt the betrayal like a punch to the gut. You mean replace me, he said quietly. You'd still have influence, Sarah tried to reason. But you wouldn't be under as much scrutiny. It would be a win-win. Ben stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. I didn't build this company for someone else to run it because my personal life makes people uncomfortable. He looked around at the faces that once supported him, now filled with doubt. If investors are afraid of a CEO with a family, then they don't belong here. And with that, he walked out. The breaking point. The weight of the day crashed into Ben as he arrived home. Alicia was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. How bad was it? She asked softly. They want me to step down. Her lips pressed together. And what did you say? That they could go to hell. Alicia let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Ben sighed, rubbing his face. What if they win, Alicia? What if they take the company from me? What if the social worker finds some reason to doubt us? What if? She placed a hand on his chest. Then we fight, together. He looked into her eyes and saw it, the same fire that had made him fall in love with her. They weren't going down without a fight. And that night, Ben made a decision. If the world wanted to question his ability to be a father, a husband, and a leader, then he proved them all wrong. One step at a time. The rise of a legacy. The world was watching. Ben Callaway knew at the moment he stepped into his home office that morning. Every major news outlet had picked up the story. Whispers had turned into headlines, and headlines had turned into a full-blown media storm. Tech mogul under fire. Can he balance business and family? Callaway's controversial marriage, a step too far. CEO's unconventional life raises investor concerns. But beneath the professional criticism, Ben could read between the lines. A black woman, 5 children, a family that didn't fit the mold. They weren't just doubting his ability to lead a company. They were questioning whether his family had a right to exist in his world. And that was something he wouldn't stand for. Turning the tables, Ben sat in the dim glow of his office, staring at the screen. His company was in turmoil. The investors wanted him out. Social services were sniffing around his home. His parents still refused to visit. Most men would have folded under the weight of it. But Ben Callaway was not most men. He picked up his phone and dialed. Mark, he said when his business partner answered. Schedule a press conference. Mark hesitated. Ben, I don't think. We're not hiding anymore. The press conference that changed everything. 2 days later, the media packed into the Callaway Technologies headquarters. Cameras flashed as Ben stepped onto the stage, wearing his signature Navy suit, his gaze unwavering. He could feel their anticipation. Some expected an apology. Others anticipated an announcement of his resignation. They were in for a surprise. "Good morning," his voice carried through the room. "Over the last few weeks, there have been questions about my leadership, questions about whether I can balance running a company and raising a family, questions about whether I belong here at all." He let the weight of those words sink in. The problem isn't my leadership. It's the outdated belief that a man can't be both a CEO and a devoted father. That success and family must exist in separate worlds, but I refuse to accept that lie. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Let's talk about the real issue," Ben continued. "The issue that no one wants to say out loud." He stepped forward. "The world isn't used to seeing a family like mine in a position of power. A black woman with 5 children and a white tech CEO. That doesn't fit the image of success that certain people expect. But let me be clear." His voice hardened. "I will not apologize for my family." The murmurs turned into stunned silence. "You doubt my ability to lead. Let the numbers speak for themselves. This company is more profitable than ever. Our innovation is at an all-time high. The only thing that's changed is that I got married. And if that's a problem for anyone, they are free to take their business elsewhere." A pause. "As for Callaway Technologies, we're just getting started. Because we're not just building software, we're building a legacy." With that, he stepped off the stage, and the world would never see him the same way again. Alicia's fight. While Ben was taking on the corporate world, Alicia was fighting her own battle. The social worker, Eleanor Greer, had scheduled another visit. This time, a formal interview with each of the girls. Alicia had spent years fighting for children's rights, advocating for young voices, and working to uplift underprivileged families. But now she was the one under scrutiny. "They want to talk to each of the girls privately," she told Ben as they sat in the backyard that evening, watching the girls paint a new mural together. "I know this process. They're looking for cracks." Ben exhaled. "What do we do?" Alicia's jaw tightened. "We let them see the truth." The girls speak. The interviews were held in the family's sunlit dining room. Eleanor Greer sat across from each girl, her notebook open. First up was Maya. "How do you feel about your new father?" Greer asked. Maya's brown eyes met hers with unwavering confidence. "Ben isn't just our father. He's our partner. He doesn't treat us like an obligation. He treats us like we matter." Greer scribbled something down. Next was Sophia. "Do you ever feel like there's too much change happening too fast?" Sophia adjusted her glasses. "Change is a constant. But do you know what hasn't changed? The love in this house. And if you're looking for dysfunction, you won't find it here." Layla leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Miss Greer, do you know why I love comedy?" Greer blinked. "Why?" "Because it exposes the ridiculousness of life. Like this." Layla gestured around. "A family is happy, stable, and thriving. But because we don't fit the normal picture, we're under investigation. That's comedy." Nina, always the gentle soul, simply placed a tiny potted plant in front of Greer. "This is a marigold," she explained softly. "It protects other plants from harmful insects. Our family is like that. We protect each other." And finally, Ava. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she opened her sketchbook and turned it to a drawing. It was a picture of their home, warm, filled with light, every detail captured with loving precision. "This is what our family feels like," she whispered. Greer looked at the sketch for a long time before closing her notebook. "Thank you, girls." The decision. A week later, a letter arrived from social services. Alicia opened it with trembling hands. "She closed it," No FURTER investigation required. The breath she had been holding finally released, and she collapsed into Ben's arms. "They can't take this from us," she whispered. Ben held her tight. They never could. Building a future. The challenges they had faced only strengthened their resolve. And with the social services case behind them, and the business standing stronger than ever, Ben and Alicia decided it was time for something bigger. "We should build something of our own," Alicia suggested one evening. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A place where kids, especially kids from unconventional families, can thrive. A space where creativity, innovation, and learning come together." The idea struck like lightning. And thus, the Idea Factory was born. A place where young minds could dream freely, where science and art coexisted, where families of all kinds found belonging. It started in their backyard, but it wouldn't stay there for long. The rise of a legacy. Loyalty and betrayal. The press conference was a turning point. The media firestorm had shifted. Instead of criticizing Ben, some outlets had started calling him a pioneer, a CEO unafraid to challenge corporate norms. Public support grew, especially among working parents and minority entrepreneurs who saw him as a symbol of change. But not everyone was celebrating. 2 days after the press conference, Ben sat in the Callaway Technologies boardroom, surrounded by a tense group of executives. Mark Chen, his longtime business partner, sat stiffly across from him, flipping through a stack of documents. The silence was suffocating. "Ben, we have a problem." "I'm guessing it's not the kind that can be solved with coffee," Ben replied dryly. Mark sighed. "Richard Thompson is making moves." Ben tensed at the name. Richard Thompson, former investor, longtime adversary. The man had been waiting for an opportunity to strike since Ben had refused to bow to investor pressure months ago. "He's rallying some of the board members to oust you," Mark continued. "Says your focus is divided and that the company needs stability to move forward." "Stability," Ben repeated, shaking his head. "That's just a fancy way of saying they want me gone." Sarah Martinez, the CFO, spoke up. "He's calling for a shareholder vote next week. If he convinces enough of them, they can remove you as CEO." Ben exhaled. He had built this company from the ground up. This was his legacy. And now they were trying to take it from him. "Let them try," he said, standing. "If they think I'm going to roll over and let Thompson win, they don't know me at all." A family united. That evening, Ben arrived home to find Alicia in the backyard, painting a wooden sign with Ava. The soft glow of string lights illuminated the space where the Idea Factory was slowly taking shape, a backyard project that was already becoming something bigger than they had ever imagined. As he stepped outside, Alicia looked up. "Rough day?" she asked, wiping a smudge of paint from her cheek. Ben rubbed his face. "Thompson is trying to take the company from me." Alicia put down her brush, studying him carefully. "And what are you going to do about it?" Ben let out a humorless chuckle. "Fight like hell." Ava, who had been quietly painting beside them, spoke up. "Maybe that's what they want." Ben turned to her. "What do you mean?" Ava hesitated, then pointed to the sign she had been working on. It was a vibrant, colorful piece that read, "Innovation starts with community." "They think your power is in that company," she said softly. "But your real power is here, with us." Ben stared at his daughter, feeling something shift inside him. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules. The shareholder showdown. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived, and the tension in the Callaway Technologies headquarters was electric. Ben walked into the grand conference hall with Alicia by his side. The board members sat at the long, polished table, their faces unreadable. Shareholders filled the seats behind them, murmuring among themselves. At the center of it all sat Richard Thompson, smirking like a man who already knew he had won. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson began smoothly, "we are gathered here today to discuss the future of Callaway Technologies. Under Mr. Calloway's leadership, we have seen impressive growth. However, he turned toward the crowd, voice lowering dramatically. His recent personal choices have introduced instability. Ben clenched his jaw. A CEO's primary duty is to his company, Thompson continued. Yet Mr. Calloway has made it clear that his priorities lie elsewhere. Investors have expressed concerns. The market has reacted negatively to his recent controversies. And so I put forth a motion to remove him as CEO, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room. Then Thompson smiled. All those in favor. Slowly, hands began to rise. Ben took a deep breath. Then he stood. Before this vote continues, I'd like to say something. Thompson frowned. You've had your time to speak, Ben. Ben ignored him. For years, I have poured my heart into this company. I have worked day and night to build something that matters. But somewhere along the way, people started believing that I was the company. He turned to face the shareholders. You think removing me will save Calloway Technologies? That's where you're wrong. Because the real value of this company isn't tied to a single person. It's tied to the people who make it work. The engineers, the designers, the visionaries. He paused. And that's why, effective today, I resign. Silence. Even Thompson looked stunned. You can't just walk away, Thompson sputtered. This is your empire. Ben smiled. No, Richard. This was your empire. And now, I'm building something better. He turned to Mark and Sarah. The company is in good hands with you two. I trust you to carry the vision forward. And with that, he walked out. A new beginning. That night, Ben and Alicia sat on their back porch, watching the girls chase fireflies across the yard. The weight of the world had been lifted from Ben's shoulders. You really just walked away from $1 billion company, Alicia murmured. Ben smirked. Yeah, guess I did. And you're okay. Ben wrapped an arm around her. Better than okay. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just chasing success. He was building something that mattered. Something that would change the world. The Idea Factory had just begun. A dream bigger than themselves. The end of an era. The start of a revolution. The morning after Ben Calloway walked away from his own company, he woke up feeling weightless. For the first time in years, there were no urgent board meetings, no shareholder pressure, no artificial deadlines dictating his every move. The empire he had spent years building was no longer his responsibility. Instead, as he sat on the back porch of his home, sipping coffee while watching his 5 daughters chase each other across the backyard, he realized something profound. He had gained something far greater than he had lost. The company had been his past. The Idea Factory was his future. The birth of the Idea Factory. What had started as a simple backyard project, an informal space where the quintuplets could explore their passions, was about to become something much bigger. Ben and Alicia had spent the past few weeks refining the vision. A creative hub where children and young innovators could bring their ideas to life. A mentorship program pairing young talent with experienced professionals. A community-driven space designed to help everyone, not just the privileged, turn their dreams into reality. The blueprint was ambitious, but the demand was undeniable. After Ben's press conference, his inbox had exploded. Parents from around the country reached out, wanting to enroll their children in the Idea Factory. Tech entrepreneurs were interested in collaborating, offering funding, mentorship, and expertise. Investors, the same ones who had doubted him before, were now eager to be part of whatever he was building next. It was time to make it real. Securing a location. A backyard could only take them so far. They needed space. Ben had his eye on an abandoned warehouse near the heart of the city. It had once been a thriving factory, but had since fallen into disrepair. Cracked windows, rusting beams, graffiti-covered walls. To most, it was an eyesore. To Ben, it was potential. He arranged a meeting with the city council, presenting a bold proposal. Give us this space, and we'll turn it into a center for innovation and learning. A place where kids, artists, and entrepreneurs can come together to create something extraordinary. There were skeptics, of course. Some council members still saw him as the scandal-ridden CEO who had thrown everything away. But Alicia's reputation in the community carried weight, and after an impassioned speech about the impact this could have, they secured the lease. The Idea Factory had a home. Now, they just had to build it. A family effort. The first day at the warehouse, the Calloway Johnson family stood in the middle of the cavernous space, taking it all in. Sophia's analytical mind was already at work. The ventilation system needs upgrades, and will need sustainable energy solutions. I can work on that. Eva, eyes wide with excitement, traced her fingers along the exposed brick walls. I can paint murals here, make it feel alive. Layla twirled in the open space. A stage. We need a stage for performances, comedy nights, storytelling sessions. Nina inspected the outside area, nodding to herself. This rooftop can hold a garden. We can teach kids about sustainability and agriculture. And Maya, their fearless leader, flipped open her ever-present notebook. We'll need funding, volunteers, a structured plan to execute everything. Alicia and Ben watched them, pride swelling in their hearts. This isn't just our project anymore, Alicia murmured. This is theirs. Ben nodded. Then let's make it happen. Rallying the community. They couldn't do it alone. Ben and Alicia reached out to everyone they knew. Former colleagues, community leaders, educators, artists, and even some of the very investors who had once doubted them. Slowly, the support poured in. Local businesses donated supplies. Construction workers volunteered their time. Teachers offered to develop educational programs. Artists and engineers signed up to mentor students. And then there were the kids, hundreds of them. Some had always been gifted, but never had a place to explore their talents. Others had been dismissed as troubled or unfocused by traditional schools, but thrived in creative environments. They came from different backgrounds, different struggles, but they all had one thing in common. They needed a place like this. The setbacks. Not everyone wanted them to succeed. A few weeks into construction, an anonymous complaint was filed against the project. Bureaucratic red tape suddenly appeared, delaying permits and inspections. Ben recognized the signs. Richard Thompson, his former rival, was still pulling strings from the shadows. But Ben wasn't the same man who had fought boardroom battles. He didn't have to play by their rules anymore. Instead of waiting for approvals to crawl through the system, they brought the fight to the people. Maya organized a citywide campaign, rallying public support. Layla turned their struggle into a viral comedy segment, poking fun at the bureaucracy in a way that had social media roaring. Nina and Sophia invited journalists to tour the site, showing real families who would benefit from the Idea Factory. Ava designed posters and digital art that spread like wildfire. When city officials saw the public demand, they had no choice but to approve the project. The Idea Factory wasn't just happening. It was unstoppable. Grand opening. A movement begins. 6 months later, the warehouse was unrecognizable. The once abandoned space had been transformed into a vibrant, thriving hub. The main hall was an open innovation space, filled with workstations, 3D printers, art studios, and science labs. The performance stage hosted open mic nights, storytelling events, and comedy workshops. The rooftop garden grew fresh produce, maintained by students learning about sustainability. The murals told stories of diversity, of resilience, of possibility. The grand opening drew thousands. The mayor attended. Celebrities donated. Former doubters now wanted to invest. Ben and Alicia stood on stage, their 5 daughters beside them, as Maya stepped forward to give the opening speech. The world told us that we didn't belong in spaces like this, she said. That a family like ours couldn't exist in the same circles as CEOs, investors, and innovators. She looked out at the crowd, eyes blazing. Well, we're here now. And we're just getting started. The crowd erupted in applause. The Idea Factory was no longer just a dream. It was a revolution. The future beckons. In the months that followed, the success of the Idea Factory exploded beyond anything they had imagined. New locations started opening in cities across the country. International organizations reached out, wanting to bring the model overseas. Tech companies, artists, and educators partnered with them, creating programs that changed lives. And at the center of it all was a family. 5 daughters, 2 parents, and an unbreakable bond. One evening, as Ben and Alicia sat outside watching the city skyline, Alicia turned to him with a soft smile. "Did you ever think it would turn into this?" Ben exhaled, shaking his head. "I thought I was walking away from success." He gestured at the vibrant energy around them. "Turns out, I was walking toward it." Alicia squeezed his hand. "And this is only the beginning. Changing the world. A dream no one could ignore." The Idea Factory had started as a backyard project. Now, it was a global movement. Ben Calloway and Alicia Johnson had watched as their vision spread like wildfire. Within a year, 14 new Idea Factories had launched across the country, each one unique, yet built on the same foundation: creativity, collaboration, and community. Tech moguls, artists, scientists, and educators all wanted in. Silicon Valley called. The United Nations called. Even Harvard wanted a research partnership. They were no longer just a family running a project. They were leaders of a revolution. And that kind of success, it always came with enemies. A challenge unlike any other. It started with a phone call. Ben was in the middle of a meeting with international investors when his phone buzzed. It was Maya. She never called during work unless it was urgent. "Dad," her voice was tight, "we have a problem." Ben's stomach sank. "What's going on?" "The new factory in Detroit. The city pulled our funding." Ben's grip on the phone tightened. "What? Why?" "They're saying we don't meet compliance requirements." "But that's not true." "This isn't a mistake, Dad. Someone's trying to shut us down." Ben exhaled sharply, his mind already piecing it together. Detroit was supposed to be their first international model, a blueprint for how Idea Factories could be built in struggling communities. It was a threat to people in power. And now, those people were fighting back. "I'll handle it," he promised. But before he could, things got worse. A smear campaign begins. The headlines hit hard. Former CEO Ben Calloway's nonprofit under investigation. Does the Idea Factory exploit children? Financial irregularities raise questions about the Calloway-Johnson empire. None of it was true. But in the world of business, perception was reality. Sponsors started pulling out. Politicians who had once supported them distanced themselves. Even some community leaders hesitated. And at the center of it all, one name kept appearing: Richard Thompson. He was out of prison, and he was coming for them. The family fights back. Alicia was the first to act. "If they want to discredit us," she told Ben, "we show the world exactly who we are." Layla's eyes gleamed. "Time for a PR war." "Time for the truth," Alicia corrected. So the Calloway-Johnson family took over the narrative. Ava designed an interactive online platform showcasing every Idea Factory success story. Sophia created a real-time data tracker proving their finances were clean. Layla turned the smear campaign into a viral joke, calling out Thompson's lies with humor that made the internet explode. Nina organized community-led press conferences, letting the kids and families speak for themselves. Maya led the charge on social media, exposing Thompson's connections to the politicians blocking their funding. The response was overwhelming. Within days, the public turned against Thompson. Within weeks, politicians backed down. And then, the Detroit Idea Factory reopened with double the original funding. Thompson had tried to destroy them. Instead, he made them stronger. The global expansion begins. With the Detroit crisis behind them, something incredible happened. The Idea Factory had captured the world's attention. Countries across the globe started reaching out. First, it was a mayor in Mumbai who wanted to launch an idea factory in one of the largest slums in the world. Then, a school in Kenya asked if they could implement the model for children without access to traditional education. Then, a corporate executive from Japan offered funding to build an idea factory Tokyo. Ben and Alicia sat in their home office, staring at the endless requests. "This is bigger than we ever imagined," Alicia whispered. Ben leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Then it's time we start thinking bigger. A radical new model." Expanding globally wasn't simple. Each country had its own struggles, its own communities, its own challenges. Ben and Alicia knew they couldn't just copy and paste the Idea Factory model. So they did something no one expected. Instead of controlling the expansion, they decentralized it. They created a network, a way for each country to take the Idea Factory philosophy and make it their own. In India, the Idea Factory became a center for tech innovation and entrepreneurship for young women. In Kenya, it transformed into an educational hub for kids in underserved villages. In Brazil, it focused on art and community activism. In Germany, it became a research-driven think tank for young engineers. The Idea Factory wasn't just a place. It was a movement, and it was unstoppable. A seat at the table. The success of the Idea Factory caught the attention of world leaders. Ben and Alicia were invited to speak at the United Nations Youth Summit, where they were introduced as the couple redefining education and innovation. The quintuplets, now young leaders in their own right, stood beside them. Maya took the stage first. "The world told us that we didn't belong here," she said, her voice steady and strong. "That our family wasn't traditional. That our dreams were too big. That our ideas weren't realistic." She looked out at the crowd, her brown eyes filled with fire. "Well, look at us now." The entire room rose to their feet in applause. They had fought against doubt. They had fought against prejudice. And they had won. The legacy lives on. Years later, standing in a sunlit courtyard, Ben watched as his daughters, now young women, led their own projects. Ava, now a world-renowned artist, was unveiling a global art installation promoting unity. Sophia was designing sustainable cities using green technology. Layla was headlining international comedy festivals, using humor to bridge cultures. Nina had founded a global environmental nonprofit, planting millions of trees across the world. And Maya, she was preparing to take the Idea Factory into space, partnering with NASA to bring innovation beyond Earth. Ben and Alicia stood hand in hand, watching them. "Can you believe this?" Alicia whispered. Ben smiled. "I always believed. Because when you build something real, something powerful, something bigger than yourself, it never dies. It only grows."